welcome everybody. I'm just going to say very briefly a few words about the strategic review of policing, which we published in March. You'll find in your pack a summary of the findings of that. As Bill said, it was without doubt the biggest single thing I think the Police Foundation's ever tried to do in its 40-year history, to do a holistic review of the future of policing. And the reason we wanted to do it was we felt that that there was a vacuum in terms of thinking strategically about policing, in the sense of thinking about the future. We think far too much of policing debate doesn't really have much reference to what kind of society we're going to be in the next 20 years. It's often quite a short-termist and tactical debate. So we wanted to look ahead and think strategically in that sense. And it was also strategic in the sense that we wanted to look at the whole of the policing system. How does it work as a whole, and how does it interact with other parts of government and society? I'll leave it for others to judge whether we were successful in achieving that. All I'll say is that I think we've definitely started a debate in a number of areas. It's very interesting that the new Met Commissioner was talking about the need to reform the misconduct process, and talking about, and I hear that the new Home Secretary is interested in that as well, insofar as it will require government action. It's interesting that our proposal for a licence to practice for police officers, probably the most controversial proposal in the document, has at the very least started a debate about what we need to do to improve learning and development so that police officers have the very best continuous professional development open to them. And I know that Andy will be talking about that in a moment. And it's interesting, if you see what was announced this week at the Labour Party conference, one of the things we said in the review, we welcome the government's investment in an extra 20,000 police officers, but we said there needs to be a renewed focus on neighbourhood policing, because all of the evidence base that we looked at showed that if you want to improve public confidence in the police, you want to improve trust in the police, and also actually if you want to reduce crime in a preventative and proactive way, then investment in neighbourhood policing is absolutely crucial. And neighbourhood policing has suffered as a result of the austerity period. And it was interesting to see that the Labour Party announcing some increased funding for neighbourhood policing based on some of the analysis that we did about saving some money in back office parts of policing. So I think the ideas that we've been generating are catching on with politicians and also within policing. And I've been going around doing a bit of a tour of the country, talking to senior leadership teams in different forces about the review and what it means for them. And I think there's a real consensus that not everyone is going to agree with every recommendation we make, but a consensus that the broad direction of travel that we set out in that document is the right one. So in terms of our next steps, we'll be continuing to meet with stakeholders, continuing to talk to politicians in the run-up to next general election. They're looking for ideas about what to do about crime and policing, and we've obviously generated a lot of ideas through our work. We'll be talking to police colleagues as well. And indeed, we'll be publishing a number of reports on some of our big ideas about how we could take them forward and trying to build support for some of the big recommendations in the review. And we'll be publishing those in the coming months. Do read the summary if you haven't looked at the report already, which is in your pack, and do get in touch with us if you have comments and suggestions. But now I just want to say a few words about our speaker. We're delighted that Andy Marsh is able to address us this evening. Andy joined Avon and Somerset Force as a new recruit in 1987. He's been worked in operational and investigative roles. He was awarded the Queen's Policing Medal in 2018, and he's been and I think he said he's the longest serving Chief Constable currently. So he's been a Chief Officer for 15 years, is that right, or something?
10 years.
10 years, yeah, so 10 years, 10 years as Chief. So, and has been Chief Constable of Hampshire and Avon and Somerset, and has been the Chief Executive of the College of Policing since 2021. So we're delighted, Andy, to hear from you this evening. Thank you.
Guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Rick, for the introduction, and thank you to the Police Foundation for hosting this lecture. I'm extremely honoured to be delivering the John Harris Memorial Lecture, the first in 3 years, and almost a year after I became the Chief Executive of the College of Policing. I didn't know John Harris, but as well as setting up the Police Foundation, he also played a key role as a Home Office Minister in setting up the then Police Complaints Authority. While that body has changed in time, now operating as the Independent Office for Policing Conduct, at a time of falling trust and confidence in policing, with serious questions being raised about the conduct of some police officers, it's particularly appropriate that today's speech is in Lord Harris's memory. This has been a big year for the Police Foundation with the publication of the Strategic Review of Policing. The review is probably the most thoughtful and comprehensive review of policing in my time in the service, and it's incumbent upon all of us to engage with the many ideas contained within it. Policing too often swings between being inward-looking and defensive, not willing to change, or waiting for reform to be done to us. That defensiveness can make us unwilling to take the action needed to change. And when reform is done to us, it can in turn create a pendulum swing in policy. Are we about protecting the most vulnerable or solving volume crime? Ramping up stop search or dialing it down? The reality is there are often no either's and ors in policing, just ands. And we have to find the just right point, the Goldilocks point, if you will, on so many issues. That pendulum swing is a theme I'll come back to later, but the Strategic Review offers a challenge. How will we across policing step up to the big ideas and reform ourselves to address the capacity, capability and organisational challenges the review sets out for us? I was particularly encouraged to see so much support for the College of Policing in the review. The college is a vital part of our policing system, which is highly localised, with all the strengths that that brings. If we're to optimise its performance and its potential, we need systems leadership, which only the college is in a position to provide. I came to the college because I believe in the potential to change policing for the better. We have unique powers to set standards, drive the right behaviour in our workforce, and ensure that officers have the access to the best operational training and practice to cut crime and keep people safe. But if we're to fulfil our potential, let alone the needs of policing, the College of Policing must change, as policing itself must change. I'm pleased to say that we're on that journey of transformation to become more relevant, more dynamic, and more connected. Relevant to the challenges policing faces and the needs of officers and staff, from improved training to guidance and advice on the most important issues they deal with. Dynamic in our response to emerging threats and in our take-up of emerging good practice, getting what policing needs to the people who need it when they need it. And connected to the service, from the front line to chiefs, and from PCCs to government, and to you, our partners in the policing mission. My record is of one of delivering change in policing. At Avon and Somerset, I was a 6th chief in 4 turbulent years. I inherited a force with issues to address. The force required improvement, notably around protecting the most vulnerable from harm. And under my leadership, established a reputation for being one of the most digitally enabled, data-driven and high-performing police forces in England and Wales. That's a record I'm proud of, and a record I'm bringing to the College of Policing. Now, this isn't a speech where I'm going to set out the details of the challenges that face policing in the 21st century. These have been comprehensively covered in the well-evidenced Police Foundation report, from the wider societal trends to changes in crime types, and from the exploitation by criminals of technology to the repeated incidents we've seen that have done so much damage to public trust. Not a few bad apples, but a culture of defensiveness and at times a reticence to challenge poor behaviour, or at worst cover up, and where officers who've let the service down too often don't feel the full force of sanctions for wrongdoing. I was fortunate in starting the college when the fundamental review into our role and purpose, launched by our chair, Nick Herbert, was coming to its conclusions. Like the Strategic Review of Policing, the fundamental review drew evidence from a wide range of stakeholders, and feedback was resounding and consistent on the issues that we face as a service. The common themes were an unwillingness or inability to take the evidence of what works and implement it consistently, a weakness in problem solving and driving improvements in performance, a failure to invest in the professional development of our people, a failure to promote the well-being and resilience, and above all, a failure to invest in leadership at all levels in the service. That's why the review sets out a very clear vision for the college to boost professionalism, drive consistency, and improve leadership. That's the mission I want to talk to you about today. Boosting professionalism means equipping officers and staff with the best possible professional skills needed to do their job, by ensuring that they have access to the best in continuing professional development, and that is properly prioritised. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that officers and staff are unprofessional, rather that policing is not to collectively prioritise their development as professionals. As in medicine, the techniques and threats in policing change. We have to upskill our officers regularly to adapt to these changing. Achieving this will empower officers and staff to use excellent professional judgment across their work to protect their public, which in turn improves the performance of policing as a whole, and will also address the concerns about some of the culture in policing. In driving consistency, we seek to overcome the inherent weaknesses of the 43 force model to bring consistency where it matters most to the public and the policing workforce. There is too much unhelpful variation across forces. For example, whether officers attend every burglary of someone's house. I happen to think they should. This frustrates the delivery of excellence in the basics and impedes the sharing of good practice and innovation. By driving greater consistency in key areas, the right things should be prioritised and the public will know what they can expect from their police service, as officers and staff focus on the activities that we know work to cut crime and keep people safe. And most importantly, improving leadership will see us develop the leadership skills of police officers and staff at all levels. All those working in policing are leaders, whether probationers on the front line or those running big teams or whole forces. The service needs to develop inclusive, data-driven and effective leadership. Excellent leadership is the key to improvement on all fronts, from underpinning a transformation in police culture to driving performance and ensuring that talent is recognised whatever level it exists at. This is particularly the case if we target our development of the first-line supervisors who are present 24/7, 365 days of the year, and you'll be pleased to know that we've already started. There's a lot of talk in policing at the moment about getting the basics right. The new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has rightly talked about cutting crime, raising standards and building trust as the core elements of his transformation of the Met. But it's critical for all forces, and if we're honest, we've become too distracted by the complexity of the world we're policing in. Too easily the victim of that pendulum swing. We have at times lost sight of those basics. For me, getting the basics right means delivering what the public expect, and indeed, there was there right from the very first days of our mission nearly 200 years ago. The prevention of detection of crime by officers and staff exercising the highest professional standards. It's about those three things which are central to our mission: boosting professionalism with skilled officers using their judgment, driving consistency in standards and implementing what works, and improving leadership at every level to deliver better performance. When we get these right, we will get the basics right and we will deliver for our communities. But to say that these basics is not to say they're not simple. In a world of digital investigation, enhanced disclosure, and significant non-crime demand, the basics can sometimes be far from simple. Getting the basics right does not have to be some nostalgic, even retro return to a fictional golden age of policing. Indeed, it means getting the fundamental components of policing right: professionalism, leadership, consistency, focusing on that core mission to prevent and detect crime and keep people safe in a complex and challenging environment. The improvements we need must be consistent and must be system-wide, and based on the evidence of what works to drive change and improve performance. And we need to be as efficient and effective as possible in driving that change, designing from the centre and delivering improvement once across all 43 forces. In so many ways, the college is needed now more than ever before. So as we implement the findings of the fundamental review of the college, we're determined to anticipate and meet the demands that policing has of us, whether in leading work to reduce homicide and tackle violence against women and girls, overhauling the way officers are trained and promoted, or issuing new guidance to toughen the sanctions on officers found guilty of wrongdoing. The college is showing that there is a new show in town capable of meeting these challenges and more. But before I talk too much about our mission, I want to talk about how we got here. Next year will be the 40th anniversary of this lecture, so it's been part of the policing world for a little bit longer than me. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on how far we've come as we make improvements to resolve today's problems in today's context. As you've heard, I joined the police in 1987, so I've been in policing for 35 years, serving as a chief for coming up to 10 years in Hampshire, Avon and Somerset, and now the college, the longest serving chief in England and Wales. In that time, and from the very beginning of my service, people have been asking with great regularity, rhetorically, the job's not what it was, is it? One wonders what Robert Peel's first intake of officers in 1829 talked about in the refreshment room. The job's not what it was, is it? The job, capital T and capital J, because there is no job like it. It's not what it was, is it? Harking back to a utopian period when resources were high, crime was low, the public universally loved us, and the press, some of whom are here tonight, blindly sang our praises. As with all utopias, it never existed. So what was the job when I started in policing? Well, I want to tell you two stories from my early days which I think will describe some of what the job was. And it shows that it's not now what it was, is it? So firstly, I want to take you back to my very first days as a new recruit, when we sat in rows at regional training schools and were taught the law. That's what initial training was back then. We were expected to turn up, learn the rules, follow orders, and certainly never ask questions that challenged the status quo. It was a strange form of learning without critical thinking. I remember being taught about the Sexual Offences Act, specifically the laws which still made it illegal for more than two people of the same sex to have sex unless it was in private, with consent, and there were no more than two people present, and both were over the age of 21. When I queried whether we still enforced this, surely there was a better use of police time, I was ridiculed. Nicknamed from then on as PC 221, after the acronym for those rules, I was told in the end of my training report, this is true, PC Marsh would do well to follow the advice of his superior officers. Well, I wonder where I would have got to today if I'd just followed that advice. In truth, it was a dispiriting start to my career, and it did cause me to question whether there was a place in policing for me. So not only was critical thinking not welcomed as part of training, but questioning at all was discouraged. I was to do as I was told, regardless of the merits, and to follow the advice of my superiors. We learnt the law and powers by heart. Bearing in mind the internet was still a twinkle in the eye of Tim Berners-Lee back then. But we learnt nothing of the context within which we would enforce those laws. There was a single way of doing things. Nothing could change, and clearly individual officers were primarily expected to fit in and not bring their experience and insight to work, unless, of course, it reinforced the existing cultural norm. Jump forward to my experience policing on the front line in Bristol. Then, as it is now, an incredibly diverse city with large Black and South Asian communities. Sitting in a van with my other exclusively white and predominantly male officer colleagues on the Ashley Road, in the heart of one of the city's most diverse neighbourhoods, we knew nothing of the experience of the people that were being sent into police. As I now know, we were seen by some as an invading army, and frankly it felt at the time like that. We weren't doing policing with the community, we were doing it to them. Relations were appalling, as we saw in the St Paul's riot in 1980 and again in 1986. Despite the tensions, community engagement was left to a tiny beat team, and encounter after encounter entrenched a hostility to the police, and we weren't making efforts to change that, even if we cared. I know at times that I felt frightened and intimidated, and I now have some insight from working closely with the people in the communities that they felt exactly the same as a result of our presence and the way that we were policing. Over the early years of my service, the police were criticised as racist. The aftermath of the murder of Stephen Lawrence, the most striking example. Criticised as sexist. The W was only dropped from WPC in 1990, and we still had separate police women's units. Colleagues could even remember when pregnant officers had to resign. And criticised as corrupt, most notably in the murder of Daniel Morgan or the Hillsborough tragedy, the shockwaves of both still rippling through policing today. These are 3 complaints and 3 examples, and there are many more, in a pre-internet, pre-camera phone world with significantly less scrutiny of police activity. The approach to candour and transparency was very different indeed. and crime seemed more straightforward. We believed it to be well understood and highly visible. Crime recording data isn't always reliable, and methodologies change. But as an example, figures show that in 1987, around 20% of crime was burglary. In the last full quarter before the pandemic, it was about 6%. And just compare the 2 or 3 calls for service, which we would receive in my early years, with the huge volume, range and complexity that officers face today. But crime wasn't straightforward. There was, in fact, a whole iceberg of hidden crime and harm that we didn't know about, or we didn't care to know about. Crimes such as domestic abuse, child abuse, and even rape were dismissed as family matters on occasions. Shockingly exposed in the documentary A Complaint of Rape from 1982, which showed officers dismissing a woman's complaint, laughing about her, and exposing her to degrading questions about her sex life. If this was what officers were willing to do in front of television cameras, what was happening behind the scenes and off screen? So through scandal after scandal, crisis after crisis, policing exposed its flaws, and changing it in the law and changes in policing followed. Nevertheless, the service that I joined in 1987 was full of dedicated people, officers and leaders whose selfless service and often lifelong commitment to the vocation of policing made a difference to the communities they policed. These are strengths that we must retain, but with all the flaws that I've described, the old ways of policing are simply not fit for purpose to address the issues today. So when people say the job's not what it was, is it? I say thank goodness for that. But I don't want to dwell too much on the past. This isn't a lecture about war stories from a policing career. But there is a point to these stories. Not only do they offer some encouragement on the progress made, but they also underscore just how important initial training is as a foundation for any profession, especially policing. I want to turn now to talk about the heart of policing, its people, and the importance of boosting professionalism in the service. I've heard people say that policing's an impossible job. I'm not sure that's true, but very few things in life really worth doing are easy, and that includes policing. I know what sort of policing are drawn to such a mission, and they are outstanding. Effective police forces need effective police officers, and that is at the heart of the changes that we've made to the entry routes into policing. I talked earlier about my entry into the service, sitting in rows, learning the law, told not to question. That approach just won't cut it in today's world, where officers are expected to make hugely complex decisions on a daily basis and quite rightly want to be empowered and equipped to challenge and develop the profession. We want officers who can protect the most vulnerable, can use data effectively, can respond to the most complex crimes, and can police with our diverse communities. In a digital world, with knowledge at our fingertips, knowing the sections of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act off by heart is a waste of time. But knowing how best to deal with a distressed victim of domestic abuse or how to solve complex problems in the community is essential. The strategic review was clear on the challenges. From a criminal justice system struggling to modernise to a creaking mental health system. Just one stat from a report, that report, gives an incredibly stark picture. Police devote about 3 million investigation hours per year to missing person reports, which is the equivalent of 1,562 full-time police officers per year, or the same number of police officers required to police the whole of North Yorkshire. We must also set up new officers to succeed through their training, but also by working in partnership with government and other parts of the public sector to cut the non-crime demand, which ties up our officers and reduces their time to prevent and detect crime. So we need the very best training for our new recruits, drawn from the widest sections of society. And that's what our new entry routes provide, and the skills that they receive now are so high that you're awarded a degree as a result of completing it. You don't need one to sign up. That's a myth, and it's an important distinction. In many ways, it's not about the degree, but it's about giving officers the best possible foundation for their future as a true policing professional. Really, this is the only way that we're going to maximise the benefit of the investment being made in the service through the increase of 20,000 officers. I'm a realist. These officers will take time to bed in and learn the skills they need. We owe a debt of gratitude to their tutors, and it's a huge influx of raw talent which is stretching our capacity to train and develop. Of course, their inexperience presents a challenge, but this infusion of new blood also presents the service with an opportunity to bring in new officers with new training, and new skills to match the challenges of policing in 2022. An opportunity to change the culture through the highest standards. An opportunity to bring in a wider array of talent into the service from across the whole of society. When I hear some of the criticisms of the new entry routes, for example, that officers have to be given protected learning time to complete their development when they should be responding to calls for service, I hear an argument that we're too busy to train people properly. To support this argument is to continue to set the service up to fail. So plenty of people have been keen to sit on the sidelines and criticise these new routes. On the basis of anecdotes, they claim it's doomed to fail, but on the basis of facts, I can tell you now why it's succeeding. New recruits coming through the entry routes are 25% better equipped to understand the needs of their community, 25% better skilled to do the job, and 30% better prepared for the role. And those aren't my words. They're the views of the new recruits themselves, surveyed about their training last year. The latest survey, out very soon, continues to bear this out, with those coming through the new routes still more satisfied and seeing greater value in the education and training they receive from their force than those from the old routes. And for those lamenting that former military personnel will be less inclined to join or are no longer wanted, they can join. They are joining, and we're even trialling new routes specifically for them. But if anyone thinks the solution to the challenges we face is reduced training and going back to the old ways, or indeed if they're happy with the culture that exists in some part of policing, I can tell them that that approach is not going to work, because the job's not what it was, is it? I accept we haven't got it all right. When I came to the college, I asked us to look again at what support we were giving forces to implement these new routes. For an institution that puts learning at its heart, we need to role model listening and improving. Where forces have worked closely with their educational provider, and I know there's some here tonight, made sure the academic elements are meaningful for the job, limited abstractions, and focused on the job assessment and applied learning rather than lengthy dissertations, they are making a success of it. Where forces have implemented it badly and let their academic partner set the direction unfettered or even outsourced the relationship altogether, they've struggled, of course. Forces need to create a strong partnership with their selected educational provider, and we are now redoubling our efforts to support those forces to bring everyone up to the standard of the best. Yes, these new routes are tough, with exacting standards, but they should be. Those who navigate it are intelligent, resilient, highly motivated officers dedicated to policing career. Better still, they're now equipped to deal with a full range of knowledge and skills to enable them to police within the context of 21st century communities. Put simply, their achievement is being undervalued by those voices within and outside the service that seek to disparage the new routes because they don't fit with their often frankly backwards cultural view of what initial training should consist of. So the tendency by some to characterise new recruits as snowflakes, bringing their teddy bears to work and needing their mum to phone in to tell their sergeants off for working them too hard, is not only a lie, but it cruelly undermines the people who are joining policing for the same reasons that I did, to serve the public and to cut crime. Their motivations haven't changed, and they deserve the best training, our support, and world-class leadership. And the development we often offer officers must last for the length of their career, whether they want to advance rapidly through the ranks or serve their communities as lifelong responsible neighbour officers. They deserve the best in professional development. As crime changes, so too must policing. And if we don't provide our people with the development they need to learn new solutions and grow in their careers, as well as giving them the time to do it, then we will be setting them up to fail. Of course, boosting professionalism is about more than training and development. It's also about living up to the highest professional standards. As I've said, policing is full of incredible people, people who are dedicated to serving their communities, fighting crime and protecting the most vulnerable. I personally know of none of them who want to be serving alongside an officer who's let their colleagues down, let the service down, and most importantly of all, let their communities down. That is in fact why so many cases of wrongdoing come to light from whistleblowing colleagues. The trust and powers we place in our police can only ever be rewarded with hard work and dedication to doing what is right. I've seen officers abuse that trust, and I've been frustrated, as chiefs up and down the country have, that independent, legally qualified chairs, who now make the decisions in most misconduct cases, sometimes fail to impose the toughest sanctions and sack officers. New guidance from the College of Policing pushes the existing rules as far as we can to make it clear that cases which undermine the confidence of the public, must see the toughest sanctions. But I'm concerned that this isn't enough. That's why I want to see misconduct rules changed so that chiefs have the power to sack people who shouldn't be wearing a uniform, so that they're directly accountable for the standards of those who serve. The second priority for the college is driving consistency across policing where it matters most. Consistency is important not for its own sake, because it means doing the right things in the right ways, the surest route to improving performance. I want to see consistency in 3 areas: where victims of crime and the public should expect they will receive the same service wherever they live, where our officers and staff should expect the same treatment in whichever force they serve, and where the evidence base is so strong and points to a single way of doing things that is much more effective than the rest. At its heart is building a clarity of purpose for policing. Now is the time for us, with the help of government, to positively assert the purpose of policing again and the values which we stand by. The public deserve a policing system that works effectively to a clear purpose, not one that tries to be all things to all people or delays common sense responses to repeated problems. I talked earlier about the pendulum in policing, the way the service can get trapped between binary positions rather than focusing on what is right, particularly in the wake of a scandal. We saw that in response to historic sexual abuse cases. Decades of policing failure was replaced with an overcorrection which left the public questioning our ability to properly interrogate the supposed evidence of fantasists. People making accusations must be supported. They must be treated with respect, kindness and compassion. But of course that doesn't mean we should automatically believe everything we're told. Common sense combined with critical thinking, good training and the ability to navigate complex issues confidently must prevail. Similarly, in the name of community engagement, we risk missing the common sense approach. Community engagement matters. Public confidence is essential. That's one of the reasons why I was the first chief in the United Kingdom to introduce body-worn video to all my officers when I led Hampshire Constabulary. And if it hadn't been for the work of the college evaluating it and showing its benefits, then it wouldn't have been rolled out so quickly, consistently or effectively across the country. In an age of citizen journalism, and when transparency is the essential antidote to mistrust, all officers should be wearing body-worn video, and it should be available to police and crime commissioners and independent groups that want to scrutinise the use of police powers. But community engagement is hard work. Getting the confidence of the community requires a concerted effort. To paraphrase it, it arrives on foot and leaves in a tweet. Take the LGBT community, and I started by talking about my questioning of the ethics of using police resources to police the actions of consenting adults. And that police response, and others like it, had left a legacy of mistrust between the police and that community. And so, when LGBT police officers were permitted to march in uniform, in pride, it was a huge moment, a clear demonstration of how far we'd come in our relations with the community. And this is needed now more than it was in recent years, following the concerns about the handling of the Stephen Port murders, which have done so much to damage the confidence of the gay community. But there is more to community engagement than marching, and there are many communities to engage with in an even-handed way. Real engagement is hard work. It takes dedication and attention to detail and follow-up every single day. To simplify it with a mathematical analogy, there's an equation. In my book, performance plus trust equals confidence. It's not simply enough to show that we care about diverse communities if we're not dealing with the most basic requirements they have of us, namely to prevent and detect crime. Engagement in a policing model built on consent is the route to effective performance in keeping people safe, and it should not be a distraction from it. At the moment, though, we're simply not effective enough. Performance is not good enough. Again, just one striking stat from the strategic review paints the picture. Detection rates have almost halved in the last 7 years. In the year to March 2021, only 9.3% of all recorded police crime resulted in charge or summons, compared to 17% in 2014. The public don't think that's good enough, and neither should we. And let me tell you, police officers across the country are as frustrated as me with these results, as are the public. There is nothing officers want more to do than lock up criminals and to be keeping communities safe. What so irritates the public when they see videos of officers on duty dancing is they don't see an expression of inclusion. they see an officer who's closed the burglary case with no further action, without even visiting the scene, stepping over the line from respectful and polite policing of an event into frivolity. Policing is a serious business. We need to roll our sleeves up and focus on cutting crime and building confidence. When certain behaviours become a distraction from that mission, it is time to think again. And when citizens find themselves having to do the job of the police, whether it's tracking down their own stolen technology using Find My Phone, only for the police to refuse to investigate, or when mothers patrol the streets because they're concerned about the safety of children, their patience with us is going to be pretty thin. It's the job of all in policing, not least of which in the College of Policing, to equip our officers with the skills and knowledge that I've talked about that they need to prevent crime and catch criminals. The public and politicians who represent them have a right to expect the very highest levels of performance with integrity, and they're right to hold us to account to deliver it. Policing spends billions of pounds of public money every year, and we cannot balk at its scrutiny and oversight, which is a fundamentally important part of any recipe for success. And the second part of that equation matters too: trust. Performance plus trust equals confidence. On the one hand, we need to build trust with groups that we've previously neglected. Particularly the black community have experienced oppressive, even racist policing in the past. And on the other hand, we have to avoid delegitimizing the police by clumsily wading into social or political issues that are not criminal. Our new guidance on managing non-crime hate incidents, for example, is further evidence of the new approach we want to take in the college. And it's very clear. The police should not be involving themselves in spats on Twitter. It's not where the public want them to be, and it's not their role. We cannot pick sides on contested social issues. We have a job to do, to police without fear and favour, to prevent and detect crime. We know what works to cut crime and build confidence. The college's evidence-based What Works toolkits are full of practical guidance for officers, and our standards and authorised professional practice provides details on the best ways of tackling some of the most complex issues. We've just got to get better across policing at implementing them. There is still too much parochialism in the service, with forces wanting to invent their own approaches. Innovation matters, and when we see emerging practice, we should be better at disseminating it quickly across the 43 forces. But we cannot have a not invented here attitude. When we know what works to cut crime, we owe it to the public to do it. The college is committed to making sure our guidance is as practical and useful to the officers on the front line as possible and deals with the most relevant issues that they're facing. Take our work on violence against women and girls. I'm proud that along with Maggie Blythe and the National Police Chiefs Council, the college is leading transformation in policing's response to the appalling harassment, abuse and violence that can be aimed at women in our society. Our approach is truly comprehensive. From a toolkit for officers investigating these crimes to ensure robust and consistent enforcement against offenders, to new high-quality training for those investigating rape and sexual offences under the Operation Soteria banner, addressing the shocking fact that many officers investigating these offences at the moment have had no specific training. I want to see this approach replicated across crime types, so we have a consistent approach to officers being supported by the college with skills, training and techniques and tools to tackle the crimes that matter most to the public. Giving officers those tools is only part of the equation. If we're truly to change behaviours and improve outcomes, we also need to focus on how people are overseen, supported and encouraged in their work. That means improving leadership. I've mentioned leadership on a number of times this evening. It's, for me, the most important element of policing. No officer or member of staff can meet their potential, have their talent identified and managed, or be challenged when their performance falls short without excellent leadership. All of you will have experienced in your chosen profession the best and the worst times. In policing, the best times are associated with teamwork, a sense of purpose, and knowing that you're making a difference, that you're being valued, challenged, and developed. At the heart of it, the thing that enables all of these factors is a leader. You can probably name the leader who's had the greatest impact on you right now. Someone who shaped and inspired you, without whom you wouldn't have achieved your best professional moments. I know who they were for me. We need to support and develop this at all levels in policing, from peers who will welcome new recruits, to sergeants and other frontline supervisors, to chief constables, setting the direction and modelling the values of the whole force. Leadership is the single most important success factor of any high-performing police force. And that's why I'm so ambitious for the work of the college in this area. The new National Centre for Police Leadership, which is being established, is going to drive world-class leadership at every level. This centre will act as the heart of our leadership work, setting standards for all levels of leadership and providing a host of guidance, tools and resources to support development for everyone in policing. It will also redefine professional development in policing, supporting as an essential element of progression and promotion by police officers, and provide specific development for underrepresented and undiscovered talent at all levels. We've already started this important work, focusing our early efforts on sergeants, who represent the backbone of police leadership and set the tone and expectations for the front line, particularly those new in service. Even with better initial training, if we just bring in officers without improving the supervision they receive when they join, we will set them up to fail, and we will fail ourselves to deliver the cultural changes we need to see. And we're now developing a new focus on senior leadership. The college has just completed a review of the way chief officers are identified, assessed, developed and recruited to drive significant and comprehensive reform in this vital area. The new route will seek to ensure the brightest and best are identified, incentivised, developed and supported to become the chief officers that the service needs. Taking together our three objectives to boost professionalism, drive consistency and improve leadership should ensure that the job is so much more than it was. Now, I'm not some blind optimist. I know that we won't reach perfection. We won't reach the end of the mission to reform policing, but we must strive for it and improve policing ourselves as far and as fast as possible. We have to, because that's what our community want, and it's also what they deserve. Policing is full of challenges. They come thick and fast, and when we least expect them. So the challenge is to lift our heads to the horizon, to look forward in the hope, indeed expectation, of making things better. This isn't naive optimism, but without a sense of purpose about where we're going, we will be marooned. Making a difference is a cornerstone of motivation in policing, and if we can help our people do just that, then they will always come to work with a spring in their step. I'm full of hope for the future of the service and confident that with the support of the college that I lead, the whole service can improve. I'm optimistic because while we should reflect and be glad that the job's not what it was in my early years, we can also be confident about where we're going, creating critical thinkers and problem solvers at every rank, leaders who care, who are prepared to listen and are equipped with the evidence to do the right thing. A focus on those crimes that harm the most vulnerable in our society with new tools and tactics, and also focusing on crime that matters most to the public, getting the basics right. Better use of data to get smart about what we do, what we don't do, and of course doing the right things in the most efficient and effective way. Effective scrutiny on behalf of the public through police and crime commissioners. A strong inspectorate led by Andy Cook, a successful and experienced chief constable working with the college to use a smarter approach to improving performance in areas that the public care about. Chiefs through the National Police Chief Council taking the lead on big issues like race and violence against women and girls. And a college, the glue in a disparate policing sector with a relentless focus on supporting the fight against crime through professionalism, consistency and leadership. So the job is not what it once was, and it cannot be. Crime has changed. The expectations of the public have changed, and the domestic, even global environment has changed. And while we must respect the experiences and lessons from the past and preserve those elements which are worth preserving, the mission to improve has to be redoubled. I haven't been shy of laying out what the issues we face in policing are and where the standards and practice are falling short. But we should never be shy of saying it or be defensive in calling it out and be clear about where we must improve. But how could we possibly fail to improve when we're surrounded by officers, staff and volunteers who would walk through walls to achieve the mission of protecting the public? I've had the privilege of a lifetime of service alongside those colleagues, the vast majority of whom have a vocational commitment that goes beyond any reasonable expectation that the remuneration could match. So call me optimistic, but by being honest about where we need to improve through professionalism, consistency and leadership, and relying on our extraordinary colleagues, who knows, officers of the future might just say, the job's a lot better now, isn't it? Thank you.